Alright, good morning students. Chapter 7, Control and Coordination. Today we are going to start with the second lesson of biology. Okay, we have finished the lesson on physics and I will be sending PDF of question answers and short notes and also short questions as well as MCQs of that particular chapter, second chapter of physics. Now we proceed further with chapter 7, Control and Coordination. Alright. You see, we have learned in biology, of course, obviously, what we are going to learn is about the plant kingdom as well as the animal kingdom. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, what is control and coordination? First of all, in everyday life, we have seen how all our actions are properly coordinated and controlled. Just imagine, you probably have no idea that when you talk or when you write something, when you play, for example, when you play basketball, okay, your hand-eye coordination, the way you dribble the ball, the way you actually carry the ball forward, everything seems to be coordinated in a proper manner. Writing also takes a lot of coordination between the brain, your hands, the nerves and everything. Okay, similarly, anything like walking, running, jumping, every action of ours, that whatever action that we do requires tremendous control and coordination. And of course, that control and coordination also helps us to interact with the environment around us. We can protect ourselves, okay? Animals can look for food and find their food also. All kinds of interaction with the environment is possible because of control and coordination. Plants, of course, have limited control and coordination, but animals, the bigger the animals, and when I say bigger, I mean more complex organisms, they've got a better control and coordination system. One of the chief architects of the control and coordination system is, of course, the brain. And the brain is most developed in higher organisms. And therefore, the brain, along with the nervous system, is so well developed in higher organisms like mammals, okay, and in cases of reptiles as well, that their control and coordination is completely different of a higher level. Okay, there are many organisms that do not have a nervous system, but the higher complex mammals have a finely tuned coordination and control system, that is the nervous system. Alright, let's go ahead now. In the previous chapter, we looked at life processes involved in the maintenance functions in living organisms, like excretion, okay, digestion, excretion, respiration, all these different kinds of systems, okay, which help the body to maintain itself and to survive, and of course even reproduce. All those systems are there in the complex organisms. Some of them are simple and they don't have specialized organs. This we discussed in the previous chapter. There we have started with a notion, with the idea that we all have, that if we see something moving, it is alive. Now it's not necessarily. For example, the planets move, okay. Even a rock, if you throw a stone at someone or at something, never do that, but of course if you throw a stone in the air, it is moving, okay. But everything that moves does not mean it is alive. Okay, just movement doesn't mean alive. That is only one aspect of life. But there are many other aspects of life that has to be considered to consider a substance as alive, living or non-living. Okay, some of these movements are in fact the result of growth, as in plants. Plants grow throughout their life. Okay, that's why a big tree gets bigger and bigger every year. A seed germinates and grows, and we can see that the seedling, the small sapling, the small plant, a seedling moves over the course of a few days. It pushes the soil aside and comes out. When you plant a seed, okay, in the soil, it gets moisture and nutrition from the soil, and then it breaks open. The process of breaking open is called germination. And when it germinates, okay, two parts come out. One goes toward the deeper into the soil, okay, that forms the root system, and one comes upwards out of the soil towards the sunlight, and that forms the shoot system. Okay, that is called the radicle, the upper one which forms the shoot and the lower one which forms the root. But the seed germinates, so movement is taking place out here, and of course the sapling or the seedling, the small plant, it gradually begins to grow and become bigger and bigger. But if its growth were to be stopped, these movements would not happen. Some movements, as in many animals and some plants, are not connected with growth. A cat running, children playing on swings, buffaloes chewing cud, Chewing cud means, you see, when you see a buffalo, it eats a lot of grass, buffaloes and cows, and then they sit in the shade, and then they start ruminating. Ruminating means to chew the cud. Okay, ruminating means to chew the movement. They move their heads, and they move their mouths like that, and at the same time they are almost half asleep, but their mouths are constantly working. You see, they regurgate. Regurgate means to bring all the contents of the stomach out towards the mouth and then chew them again. These bovine creatures, the cow and buffalo family, bovine creatures, they chew the cud. Okay, but that is also a kind of movement. These are not movements caused by growth. In this case, of course, when children play, they are enjoying themselves. They are not really growing. Some movements are associated with growth, some are not. Why do we associate such visible movements with life? A possible answer is that we think of movement as a response to changes in the environment of an organism. The cat may be running because it has seen a mouse. Not only that, we also think of movement as an attempt by living organisms to use changes in their environment to their advantage. Okay? That is called adaptation. When an organism changes and uses the changes in its environment, it is slowly adapting. Okay, for example, the eye, not just the human eye, but the eye in general, is a classic example of adaptation. How the eye has evolved from single-celled creatures. Okay, they had no eyes. From there, new organisms developed with complex eyes, and human eyes are also fantastic. All this development and evolution of the eye is a result of adaptation. Organisms responding to the changes in the environment. The cat may be running because it has seen a mouse. Not only that, we also think of movement as an attempt by living organisms to use changes in their environment to their advantage. Plants go out into the sunshine. Okay, the upper part of the plant is always going towards the sunshine. You may have seen a sunflower. In fact, a sunflower is called a sunflower because it is almost always facing the sun. In the evening, you will see in the western direction that almost all the sunflowers are facing towards the west. Okay, plants grow towards light, sunlight. Okay, that way. That is also a type of movement, an important movement. Not only that, we also think of movement as an attempt by living organisms to take advantage of plants. Plants go out into the sunshine. Children try to get pleasure and fun out of swinging. Buffaloes chew cud to help break up tough food, undigestible food, so as to be able to digest it better. When bright light is focused on our eyes, or when we touch a hot object, we detect the change and respond to it with movement in order to protect ourselves. Okay, for example, when you go out into the harsh sunlight, okay, you tend to wear glasses to protect your eyes. But the eyes also have their own natural mechanism. The pupils, instead of dilating, they contract, so that the inner part of the eye is not bombarded with harsh light. It contracts a little, the pupil, the central part through which light enters. Okay, it contracts a little bit, and as a result, it protects itself from excessive harsh light of the sun. If you think a bit more about this, it becomes apparent, it becomes clear that all this movement in response to the environment is carefully controlled. Okay, it is carefully controlled. Each kind of a change in the environment evokes, it produces an appropriate movement in response. Whenever something happens, for example, a mouse, when it sees a cat, it runs because it knows the cat is going to kill it. Okay, similarly, snakes and other animals, even buffaloes, and when the moment they see a lion, they run for their lives. That is also a response mechanism to external stimulus. When we want to talk to our friends in class, we whisper rather than shouting loudly. Of course, on the playground you will shout, and you know why. But in the classroom you can't shout. You will whisper very softly, very quietly, because you don't want to be heard by everybody else. Clearly, the movement to be made depends on the event that is triggering it. What is causing you to talk softly in the class? There is something in the classroom, the teacher's presence, and the fact that you are supposed to keep quiet and listen to the teacher. That makes you, it triggers a movement, it makes you talk very quietly in whispers. Okay? Therefore, such controlled movement must be connected to the recognition of various made in connection to the various events in the environment, followed by only the correct movement response. In other words, this is important. Living organisms must use systems providing control and coordination. In keeping with the general principles of body organization in multicellular organisms, specialized tissues are used to provide these control and coordination activities. Now, in our case, of course, we have got the brain. Okay, the master organ of the body, the brain. Okay, then in addition to that, we have got muscles which can contract and relax to allow us to move. Addition to that, we have got nerves and the nervous system. Different types of nerve. We have got the sensory nerves which allow us to sense things, the motor nerves which allow us to move muscles, and mixed nerves which are a combination of mixed nerves and sensory nerves, motor nerves and sensory nerves. In addition to the nerves, we have got the spinal cord which also facilitates quick response. Okay, sometimes you see when you touch an object which is hot, your response is instantaneous. In a fraction of a second you withdraw your hand. Sometimes the brain is not involved. Brain is involved in the messages of every single part of your body. Okay, when messages go to the brain and come back from the brain to the, see for example, when I am moving my hand, a message goes via the nervous system through the spinal cord to my brain to withdraw my hand and then relax it, withdraw and relax it. That is a conscious movement. I am doing it and thinking about it and doing it. It's a conscious action. Okay, but if I touch a hot object, it's an unconscious movement. Without even thinking about it, my hand is withdrawn instantaneously. It is extremely fast. That is a reflex action. Here the spinal cord and all the nerves do everything. There is no thought process. The brain is cut out completely. So many organisms in the living world have got very fast response, although the brain is poorly developed. Okay, for example, if you take a mongoose and a snake, when they are fighting, they are moving very fast. The moment the snake strikes, the mongoose jumps out of the way. The action is almost instantaneous. Okay, now why is it able to respond so quickly? A mongoose does not have a well developed brain, but its response mechanism, that reflex action, is very fast. Sometimes in cricket also, when you are catching, in the slips of the ball comes very fast to you. Someone who is fielding very close to the bat at silly point, okay, the person would instantly react to the ball. There is almost no time for him to catch the ball, but he just puts his hand out and catches the ball. That is almost like a reflex action. There is no time to think. Okay, if you think a bit more, okay, living organisms, in keeping with the general principles of body organization, multicellular organisms, specialized tissues are used to provide this control and coordination. In our case, the brain and the spinal cord and the nerves. Alright, animals, we come to nervous system now. You see, the nervous system is a system of nerves. Okay, the nerves contain what are called neurons. Neurons are the nerve cells. They are some of the longest cells in the body, the neurons. Okay, they are extremely long and big, and we'll come to the structure of the neuron in a moment. But we have a very highly specialized nervous system, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. We have got two, and of course there is a third one. It's called the autonomous nervous system. The word autonomous itself indicates that everything happens automatically, involuntary. For example, your heart continues to beat even when you are fast asleep. You can't think about stopping your heart and stop your heart. That's not possible. Even if you want to die, even if a person wants to commit suicide, he cannot just say that, okay, my heart stop beating. It won't stop beating. Okay, that is an involuntary action. Similarly, breathing is also an involuntary action. When you are fast asleep, your heart is still beating, although it slows down a little bit. Your lungs are still taking in air and throwing out carbon dioxide. Certain activities happen without your knowledge, without thinking about it. Okay, those are involuntary actions. The autonomous nervous system carries out such things. So we have the central nervous system, which involves the brain. Then we have got the peripheral nervous system, and finally we have got the autonomous nervous system. So we have got a very well defined coordinate system, control and coordinate system in the body, and of course the brain is the master organ. But there is a network. You see, in the whole body there has to be a network of sort of road like network, which allows the messages to go to and fro from the brain to the different parts of the body. Okay, for example, if I touch something which is cold, okay, if I touch it, then I get that feeling that it's cold. Okay, my brain recognizes that it is cold. But that sensation of touch and the fact that it is cold, how do I know? Because the messages from my fingertips, they go along the sensory receptors. The sensory receptors at the ends of the nerves, they carry the message via the nerves all the way through the spinal cord and to my nerves. Of course, it does not take very long. Okay, the whole pathway, the neural pathway, it's called neural pathway. The neural pathway is not it is long, but it does not take too long to respond. Okay, समय नहीं लगता है इसमें, काफी जल्दी हो जाता है और हमको पता चल जाता है कि ये ठंडा है, ये गर्म है. बट बहुत गर्म है तो हम इंस्टेंटली विड्रॉ करते हैं. ओके, उसमें ब्रेन इन्वॉल्व नहीं होता है, वो स्पाइनल कॉर्ड ही उसको मैसेज दे देता है कि जल्दी ले लो वापस हाथ. But we'll come to that in a moment. All right, animals, remember, plants do not have a nervous system. Animals do, and that also lower animals, bacteria and viruses and all, they don't have a nervous system. Unicellular organisms don't have a nervous system. Higher organisms, the mammals, the reptiles, and some birds also, they have a proper, well-defined nervous system. Otherwise, all animals don't have. Okay. In animals, such control and coordination are provided by nervous and muscular tissue, which we have studied in class 9. Touching a hot object, okay, let's carry on. Touching a hot object in an urgent and dangerous situation for us. We need to detect it and respond to it. How do we detect that we are touching a hot object? Okay, all information from our environment is detected by specialized tips of some nerve cells. You see, for example, suppose you got a toothache, okay, दांत में दर्द हो रहा है, कैविटी हो गया है और कैविटी अंदर तक गया है. कोई ठंडा चीज या गर्म चीज खाने पीने से एकदम दर्द होता है. ये दर्द क्यों होता है? ओके, बिकॉज एट द रूट्स ऑफ द टीथ, डीप डाउन इनसाइड द इनर पार्ट, ओके, there are nerve endings of the nerves. At the end of the nerve there are nerve receptors. These receptors at once pick up the pain. You see, that pain receptors, they pick up the pain and they transmit it via the nervous system and the spinal cord to the brain, and you feel intense pain. All right, if those nerve receptors are damaged, then you won't feel any pain at all, although the pain will be there, but you won't feel it. The same thing happens, you see, when people are given an injection for pain relief. बहुत दर्द हो रहा है तो उसको कुछ सब्सटेंसेस होते हैं जैसे कि मॉर्फिन है और एनीथिंग विच किल्स द पेन, पेन रिलीवर्स जिसको बोलते हैं, मेडिकेशन, पेन रिलीवर्स देते हैं तो वो क्या है कि नर्व एंडिंग्स को दबा देते हैं. दबा मतलब इट्स द नर्व एंडिंग्स बिकम इनएक्टिव फॉर सम टाइम. व्हेन द नर्व एंडिंग्स बिकम इनएक्टिव फॉर सम टाइम, यू डोंट फील द पेन. Okay, so we need to detect it and respond to it. How do we detect that we are touching a hot object? All information from our environment is detected by specialized tips of some nerve cells. These nerve receptors are usually located in our sense organs. The skin is also a sense organ. Okay, the tongue is a sense organ. The nose, the inner part of the nostrils, that's a sense organ. The ears are a sense organ. We've got 5 sense organs, such as the inner ear, the nose, the tongue, and so on. So gustatory receptors which will detect taste, while olfactory receptors will detect smell. The word olfactory means connected to smell. The word gustatory means it is related to digestion and to taste. All right, gastronomic delight. When we say the cook is a gastronomic delight, that means the cook is so good that he cooks up beautiful recipes. Gastronomic delight means delight for our stomach, delight for our taste buds. Now these, you see, the tip of the tongue, the upper part, contains certain specialized cells called taste buds. These taste buds allow you to taste. Okay, and of course the hearing, the sense of hearing is possible because of the olfactory nerve which carries the impulse of smell or of hearing right to the brain. You see, the ear, nose and throat are all interconnected. Okay, they are all interconnected, ear, nose and throat, and that's why one smell affects the other. Okay, one sensation affects the other. इसलिए कभी जुकाम हो जाता है ना, सर्दी बहुत हो जाती है तो हमारा टेस्ट में भी फर्क पड़ जाता है, स्मेल में भी फर्क हो जाता है, टेस्ट में भी फर्क हो जाता है, और थोड़ा सुनने में भी कभी कभी तकलीफ हो जाती है, बिकॉज बहुत क्लॉगिंग हो जाता है, अंदर बिल्कुल म्यूकस भर जाता है, नोज के अंदर ब्लॉक हो जाता है, और ईयर, नोज और थ्रोट तीनों को थोड़ा सा अफेक्ट हो जाता है. ऑलराइट, नाउ आई हैव रिटन अ कपल ऑफ क्वेश्चंस हियर. Okay, the first question here is, explain the structure and functioning of the neuron with the help of a diagram. I'll just come to that in a moment. There is another question here. What are taste buds, or they are also called gustatory receptors? And gustatory receptors has nothing to do with gas. Okay, they have to do with taste. And where are they located? They are located on the upper part of the tongue. इसलिए अगर that time you must be very careful. कभी कभी लोग है ना टंग क्लीनर यूज करते हैं टंग को साफ करने के लिए, ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं, but don't overuse it. It can damage the taste buds. Similarly, अगर कोई भी चीज बहुत गर्म है, if you heat, you've got a habit of eating something which is very hot, तीखा नहीं बहुत गर्म, okay? हॉट को तीखा भी बोलते हैं, तीखा होता है उसको हम इंग्लिश में हॉट भी बोलते हैं, एंड समथिंग विच इज वेरी मतलब बहुत गर्म है उसको भी हम हॉट बोलते हैं, ओके? चिली, इट्स हॉट, चिली इज हॉट मीन्स तीखा है, ओके? चाय, टी इज हॉट मीन्स इट इज क्वाइट, द टेम्परेचर वाइज इट इज हाई. अब ये गर्म चीज खाने से कभी कभी टेस्ट बड्स डैमेज हो जाते हैं. Not spicy, I'm not talking about spicy food, I'm talking about hot, for example tea and coffee, okay? That can damage the taste buds. You have to be careful about that. Alright, what are taste buds or gustatory receptors, and where are they located? On the tips of the tongue, the upper part of the tongue. And the second question here is, what are olfactory receptors? Olfactory receptors are located in the inner part of the ear, where the olfactory nerve, एक nerve होती है जो विजुअल कॉर्टेक्स की तरह, जो विजुअल कॉर्टेक्स ब्रेन में हमको देखने में कामयाब. You see, the olfactory receptors are those receptors which are connected to the brain via the olfactory nerve. Okay, in the same way the optic nerve connects the retina to the visual cortex of the brain. Remember, I told you in the previous lesson, it is the brain which sees, it is the brain which tastes, and it is the brain which also feels and hears. If the brain is damaged, you can't smell, you can't taste, you can't see, nothing. Okay, there are certain centers of the brain which are connected with all the five senses. So what are the olfactory receptors? They are spatial receptors which are located along the olfactory nerve, and they are connected to the brain, so we are able to smell them. Okay, olfactory receptors, not auditory nerve. Olfactory has to do with smell, okay, and auditory has to do with hearing, कान में. Okay, but olfactory receptors have to do with smell. So what are olfactory receptors? They are connected to the nose and the olfactory nerve, and they are taken to the brain. Okay, auditory, the word auditory means smell, hearing, and that is different. So olfactory is different, auditory is different. Auditory is with a sense of hearing, olfactory with a sense of smell. And of course, as I said here, these are gustatory receptors or taste buds. Alright, here this one, okay, explain the structure and functioning of the neuron. This is a very important question. It has been asked several times in the exams, so just be a little bit careful. This diagram is quite simple. Everybody should be able to, okay, you should be able to do it very well. Alright, now let us just see here. If you see this nerve cell or a neuron is a nerve cell. This nerve cell is one of the longest cells in the human body. Okay, and there are millions of such cells. They are all interconnected. You see these nerve endings. Okay, the nerve endings, they are generally connected to the muscles. Okay, they are able to connect to the muscles, and therefore they can convey information to the muscles, and from the muscles back to the nerves. The nucleus of the nerve cell, and then there is the cell body, the inner part, and then there are those long hair-like threads. Okay, dendrites. They are called dendrites. These dendrites, they branch out in different directions. Okay, then there is a one single long strand. That single long strand is called the axon, and it is enveloped, it is surrounded in a sheet, a protective sheet. Okay, that protective sheet gives it protection. Okay, and where two of them are connected, okay, these nerve endings are there, this axon and the dendrites. The dendrite of one neuron is connected to an axon of the other neuron. So dendrite and axon, they are actually the place where they join together. The dendrite and an axon. That way a network is formed. Millions of neurons firing at the same time. Okay, the dendrite, you can see there are lots of dendrite out there. Each one is connected to the axon of the next neural cell, of the next neuron. So a branch is formed. Okay, millions of neurons interconnected, and that is why how our nervous system works. And information is an information highway. Information is processed. You see where the dendrite connects to the axon, it is covered in a sheet. That is called the synapse. The synapse is where exchange of information takes place between two neurons. ये देखो, ये dendrite है जो you can see in the diagram, और ये दूसरा न्यूरॉन का axon है. वो दोनों को इस तरह से ज्वाइंट हो जाते हैं. यहाँ पे जो ब्रिज है ना, इट इज थिकली कवर्ड इन अ प्रोटेक्टिव लेयर, and this bridge is called the synapse. Information from one neuron to another neuron passes through this synapse. Okay, chemical combination takes place here. It's not chemical combination, but chemical reactions type of takes place, and then it is converted into electrical impulses. Okay, so some kind of chemicals are produced which causes this kind of chemical receptors to be passed on in the form of electrical impulse from dendrite to axon of the next cell, neural cell, and this creates millions of pathways, and that is why they are so important. Okay, all right, so that is the structure of the neuron, and below that you can see what is given here. Okay, how you can look at it carefully. Axon, it is connected to muscle fiber, how it sticks to the muscle fiber. Okay, that is इस तरह से stick हो जाते हैं, and then there are capillary, those capillaries carry blood, so the muscles remain active, the muscles remain with full of nutrition and oxygen. And of course there is a small diagram, amplified, it is magnified diagram. You can see how the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, are surrounding it, and they also help in production of energy for the cells. All right, this information acquired at the end of the dendritic tip, the tip of the dendrite of a nerve cell, sets off a chemical reaction that creates an electrical impulse. This electrical impulse travels from the dendrite to the cell body and then along the axon to its end. Understood? So the axon carries the messages and then passes on to another dendrite, and the dendrite then passes on to a cell body to its axon, and from the axon to another cell, that way. So a whole pathway is created. At the end of the axon, the electrical impulse sets off the release of some chemicals. These chemicals cross the gap between the two neurons where they are joined together, the bridge. These chemicals cross the gap or synapse and start a similar electrical impulse in a dendrite of the next neuron. And this is how information highway, or how information passes from one to the other. This is a general scheme of how nervous impulses travel in the body. A similar synapse finally allows delivery of such impulses from neuron to other cells such as muscle cells or different glands of the body. Right, a question is here, what is the nervous tissue composed of? Okay, nervous tissue, as I have underlined out there, nervous tissue is made up of an organized network of nerve cells or neurons and is specialized for conducting information via electrical impulses from one part of the body to another. So you can see the question is here, the answer is also here. You can see this is the answer. Answer to what? Answer to this question. What is the nervous tissue composed of? The nervous tissue is made up of an organized network of nerve cells or neurons and is specialized for conducting information via electrical impulses from one part of the body to another. So if I write a question, the answer is there itself. Okay, it's next to it. All right. Now let's proceed further. Activity 7.1. Okay. Put some sugar in your mouth. How does it taste? We all know the taste of sugar. Everybody loves the taste of sugar. Unfortunately, sugar can be bad also. Block your nose by pressing it between your thumb and index finger. इस तरह से उसको बंद करो. Now eat sugar again. Is there any difference in its taste? While eating lunch, block your nose in the same way and notice if you can fully appreciate the taste of food you are eating. Now you see the idea here is, you see, all the taste, almost all the sense organs are interconnected. In other words, one sense organ can affect another sense organ. For example, if a person becomes blind, okay, when a person becomes blind, his sense organ of sight, that is eyes, become completely useless and he loses his sense of sight. Okay, देखने की जो sight की ability है, he loses that ability. अब वो देख नहीं सकता है. एक सेंस ऑर्गन गया, एक सेंस गया 5 में से, तो दूसरे जो 4 सेंस है वो और भी पावरफुल हो जाते हैं. So अंधे लोग होते जो blind people है, unfortunately they can't see, but the sense of hearing becomes even better. Okay, इसलिए वो सुन के पता चल जाता है किस डायरेक्शन में जा रहा है, कैसे जा रहा है. उसका सुनने की आदत, मतलब उसकी जो sense of hearing becomes even better than a normal person. Why? Because you see all the sense organs are interconnected. The brain does something like that. For example, अगर 2 किडनी में से एक किडनी खराब हो जाती है तो दूसरी किडनी पूरा काम ले सकती है. वो थोड़ा सा enlarge भी हो जाती है and वो पूरा काम ले सकती है. So that's why all of them are interconnected. So इसलिए अगर सर्दी जुकाम हो जाती है, हमारा नोज ब्लॉक हो जाता है, हम सांस ठीक तरह से ले नहीं सकते हैं, म्यूकस हो जाता है नोज के अंदर, दैट विल अफेक्ट योर सेंस ऑफ टेस्ट। तुम्हें ऐसा लगेगा कि मुझे टेस्ट में भी फर्क पड़ गया, ओके, थोड़ा थोड़ा सुनने में भी फर्क पड़ जाता है। दिस इज बिकॉज ऑल द सेंस ऑर्गन्स आर इंटरकनेक्टेड। ऑलराइट, to proceed further, is there any difference in how sugar and food taste if your nose is blocked? If so, why might this be happening? Because they are all interconnected. Read and talk about possible explanations for these kind of differences. Do you come across a similar situation where you have a cold, सर्दी जुकाम हो जाती तब ऐसा होता है? Alright? Yes, let's keep working further. What happens in a reflex action? Alright, what is a reflex action? First of all, reflex action is an instantaneous action. ओके, अगर कोई फॉर एग्जाम्पल द ब्लिंकिंग ऑफ योर आईलिड्स, ये जो आईलिड्स होते हैं उसको हम ब्लिंक कर रहे हैं बार बार ऐसे, ओके, द ब्लिंकिंग इज अ रिफ्लेक्स एक्शन। हमको पता भी नहीं चल रहा कि हम ब्लिंक कर रहे हैं। देखो ये वीडियो कर रहे हैं तो बातचीत कर रहे हैं, जो उसके दौरान मैंने 1 मिनट में शायद 5, 10, 15 बार ब्लिंक किया होगा, मुझे मालूम भी नहीं था, आपने भी ब्लिंक किया होगा। सो द ब्लिंकिंग ऑफ द आईलिड्स इज ऑलमोस्ट अ रिफ्लेक्स एक्शन। अगर कोई तुम्हारे मुंह के नजदीक आ जाता है और फिर कोई ऐसा करता है, तुम्हें मुंह के पास ऐसा करता है, तो you close your eyes at once. That is a reflex action. Okay, you move your head away at once. That is a reflex action. Reflex action is always very fast. Now, why is a reflex? It is mostly protective in nature. But why is it fast? It is fast because the brain is not involved. You see, generally जो हम action लेते हैं, voluntary action, कुछ भी करते हैं, कोई चीज को टच करके धीरे से हाथ ले लेते हैं, that is a voluntary action involving the brain. The brain is involved in that action. Okay, in other words, the brain carries the message to the sense of those organs, and from the organs the message goes back to the brain. So there is a pathway for the message. From the concerned organ, the message goes to the spinal cord via the nerves, and then from the spinal cord is connected to the back of the brain. We'll just come to that in a minute. So all the impulses are going back and forth through the spinal cord to the brain. उसमें थोड़ा सा वक्त लगता है, इसलिए एक एक्शन है थोड़ा सा स्लो होता है। बट जब ब्रेन इन्वॉल्व नहीं होता है, सिर्फ स्पाइनल कॉर्ड इन्वॉल्व होता है, तो वो एक्शन एकदम फास्ट हो जाती है, एंड दैट इज व्हाट इज कॉल्ड अ रिफ्लेक्स एक्शन। Okay, reflex is a word we use very commonly when we talk about some sudden action in response to something in the environment. We say, I jumped out of the way of the bus reflexively, or I pulled my hand back from the flame reflexively, or I was so hungry my mouth started watering reflexively. What exactly do we mean? We mean that something happened without the brain involvement, without thinking. The process of thought was not there. Okay, just imagine if, for example, when a snake strikes at a mongoose, and if a mongoose was slow, okay, it would be in serious trouble. But in this case, the mongoose instantly, reflexively jumps out of the way. Okay, a common idea in all such examples is that we do something without thinking about it, or without feeling in control of our actions. Yet these are situations where we are responding with some action to changes in our environment. How is control and coordination achieved in such situations? Let us consider this further. Take one of our examples. Touching a flame in an urgent and dangerous situation for us, or in fact for any animal. Just imagine if accidentally a baby, 6 महीने की baby है, a 6-month-old baby, 1-year-old infant, has no idea what hot and cold is. If the baby touches something hot, even the baby will instantly withdraw its hand. Why? Because nature has designed our body in such a way. Even in the case of the baby, that action would be instantaneous, although the baby has no idea what happened. Of course, the baby will start howling with pain because it has suffered something. Okay, and that reflex action is a protective mechanism. All right, just imagine what would happen if there was no reflex action. It would be very slow, and the burning would be a lot more. How we would we respond? One seemingly very simple way to think about consciously about the pain and the possibility of getting burned, and therefore we move our hand. An important question then is, how long will it take us to think about all this? The answer depends upon how we think. If nerve impulses are sent along the way we have talked about earlier, then thinking is also likely to involve the creation of such impulses. Thinking is a complex activity. Some people find it very difficult to think. So it is bound to involve a complicated interaction of many nerve impulses from many neurons. thousands and millions of neurons are involved in the thought process, and therefore it takes time. Okay, it's not something which happens instantaneously. It takes a little while because thinking is involved. In this case, if this is the case, it is no surprise that the thinking tissue in our body consists of a dense network of intricately intermingled arranged neurons. It sits in the forward end of the skull. This is called the front lobe of the brain. ये जो है ना, इसको front lobe बोलते हैं, इसको temporal lobe बोलते हैं. These sides of the brain are called temporal lobes. These are extremely soft and sensitive part. अगर देखो, अगर हाथ से इधर टच करते हैं, ये थोड़ा सा sensitive लगता है, ये इतना sensitive नहीं लगता है. Okay, because this is hard and cranial. This whole part is called the cranial cavity. Okay, there are five flat bones in the upper part of the skull. This part, okay, is called the temple, T-E-M-P-L-E, temples, the left temple and the right temple. These are slightly softer tissues, and if you touch it, you feel a little bit of sensitivity there. Okay, from all over body which it takes about before responding to them. Obviously, in order to receive these signals, this thinking part of the brain in the skull must be connected to nerves coming from various parts of the body. Similarly, this part of the brain, that is the frontal part, which allows us to think. Similarly, if this part of the brain is to be instruct muscles to move, nerves must carry this signal back to different parts of the body. If all of this is to be done when we touch a hot object, it may take enough time for us to get burnt. काफी स्किन को डैमेज हो जाएगा, इतना अगर लंबा वक्त लगता है. Okay, the frontal lobe, the front lobe of the brain. Okay, this front forebrain. This is also called the forebrain. F-O-R-E. Fore means front. Forebrain. This is the frontal lobe of the brain, or it is called the forebrain. This is where the thinking takes place. And if everything goes through this, it is going to take a long time. Okay, how does the design of the body solve this problem? Rather than having to think about the sensation of heat, if the nerves that detect the heat were to be connected to the nerves that move muscles in a simpler way, the process of detecting the signal or the input and responding to it by an output action must be completed very quickly. See, I told you in the beginning of the lesson, there are three types of nerves. Okay, there are sensory nerves. So here we are talking about sensory nerves. Then there are motor nerves, which are connected to the muscles. They allow us to move. So sensory nerves, motor nerves, they are all interconnected. So when you touch something hot, the sensory nerves feel the sensation, convey the message to the motor nerves. The message does not go to the brain. So the action is extremely fast. Alright. So, and I have written a question here. Okay. What is the reflex arc? Where does the reflex arc originate? The reflex arc actually originates in the nerves which carry the sensation of heat or any other sensation. वहां से nerve impulse start होता है, और पूरा एक nerve का bundle होता है spinal cord में. Spinal cord के आजू बाजू. That's why you see, if a person damages the spinal cord during a fall, कुछ स्पोर्ट्स एंड गेम्स में जैसे रग्बी लोग खेलते हैं, फुटबॉल खेलते हैं, और जिम्नास्टिक्स में कोई अगर व्यक्ति स्पाइनल कॉर्ड को डैमेज करता है, इट कैन हैव अनबिलीवेबल कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस. इट विल पैरालाइज योर होल बॉडी. ओके, what is the spinal cord? We'll come to that later on. I'm not going to want to go into too much detail. The spinal cord is actually a thin thread-like thing. Okay, a thin wire जैसा thread होता है, and it is surrounded on all sides by a bony tissue. That bony tissue is called the vertebrate, or rather vertebra, not vertebrate, but vertebra. There are 32 vertebrae in the human body. Okay, those bony pieces, each bone is called a vertebrate. Each one, this is the hollow part. You see, vertebrate, each bone, उसमें से spinal cord निकलता है, और आजू बाजू एक प्रकार का फ्लूइड होता है. That fluid is a liquid which protects the spinal cord. तो spinal cord को protection करने के लिए काफी nature ने दिया है. That bony cage is given. Okay, 32 columns. It's called the vertebral column because there are 32 bones there. The bones are hollow. The spinal cord passes through that. The spinal cord is only a cord, thin thread-like structure. और आजू बाजू एक liquid भी होता है अंदर. It is called the cerebrospinal fluid. That cerebrospinal fluid actually protects it. Okay, और ये जो cartilage है ना, ये bone नहीं है, cartilage है, soft tissue है. दो vertebra, okay, दो जो vertebral column है जिसमें जो bones होते हैं, दोनों के बीच में इस तरह का tissue होता है, soft tissue. तो थोड़ा cushion मिलता है उसको. ओके अगर हम जंप करते हैं तो भी ये इसको थोड़ा सा कुशनिंग इफेक्ट, जैसे कि साइकिल के अंदर आगे कैसे जंपर होते हैं मोटरसाइकिल के आजू बाजू, उसको सॉफ्ट कर देता है जंप को, तो ये प्रोटेक्शन और उसको शॉक एब्सॉर्बर की तरह काम करता है. So how does the design of the body solve this problem? Rather than having to think about the sensation of heat, if the nerves, the sensory nerves that detect the heat were to be connected to the motor nerves that detect the muscle movement, okay, that move muscles in a simpler way, the process of detecting the signal or the input and responding to it by an output action might be completed quickly. So the sensory nerves and the motor nerves, they pass the message to each other very quickly and the action becomes very fast. Such a connection is called a reflex arc. Okay, and hence I have given this question here: what is a reflex arc and where does it originate? Such a connection is called a reflex arc. Where should such a reflex arc connection be made between the input nerve and the output nerve? Now, in this case, the input nerve is the sensory nerve, and the output nerve is the motor nerve. Motor matlab mechanical motion. The word motor, motor nerve. Motor does not mean car. Motor here means movement. Okay, so sensory nerves detect the sense, okay, the change in temperature and things like that, and the output nerve, the motor nerves, allow the movement of muscles. The best place, of course, would be at the point where they first meet each other, where the motor nerve and the sensory nerves meet each other. Nerves from all over the body meet in a bundle in the spinal cord, okay, on their way to the brain. Now the spinal cord at the back of the brain, okay, the spinal cord is connected to the lower part of the brain. This lower part of the brain is called the medulla. The medulla is the part of the brain, okay, where the spinal cord enters the brain. पीछे का portion, okay. This part, you can see my back part, that is called the occiput. Occiput of the brain. This part, the back part. Occiput के पीछे there are certain centers of the brain called the visual cortex, which allows us to see. Okay, if the visual cortex is damaged, our sense of sight can be damaged. Okay, the medulla is here connected just at the base of the brain, where the spinal cord meets the brain, the medulla. Those are sensitive parts of the brain. इसलिए अगर किसी को बहुत चोट आ जाती है ना पीछे से, तो ब्रेन में काफी डैमेज हो सकता है. Alright, so nerves from all over the body meet in the bundle in the spinal cord on their way to the brain. Reflex arcs are formed in the spinal cord itself, although the information input also goes out to reach the brain. So where the reflex arcs originates? The spinal cord. Okay, of course reflex arcs have evolved in animals because the thinking process of the brain is not fast enough. A mongoose, I give you an example of a mongoose, because a mongoose is very fast, because it has to be fast when it fights with a snake. Okay, in the animal kingdom there are many organisms which have a poorly developed brain. उसका brain है ना poorly developed होता है, लेकिन उसके reactions एकदम fast होते हैं. उसकी वजह है they have got a very good system of reflex arcs, okay, where the brain is not involved. Alright, of course reflex arcs have evolved in animals because of the thinking process of the brain is not fast in those animals. The brain has not developed. In fact, many animals have very little or none of the complex neuron network needed for thinking, just like humans, they don't have it. Okay, so it is quite likely that reflex arcs have evolved as efficient ways of functioning in the absence of a true thought process and a true nervous system. Many of these animals don't have a proper nervous system, just like we have. We have a central nervous system which involves the brain, the peripheral nervous system which does not involve the brain, and finally, of course, we also have the autonomous nervous system which allows organs to function involuntarily. However, even after complex neuron networks have come into existence, reflex arcs continue to be more efficient for quick responses. Although in our case, we have got a fantastically developed brain, we still have reflex action to protect us from different types of threats and insecurities. Alright, let's proceed further. Now we come to this reflex arc and the diagram. You see here, I have written some questions here. CNS means the central nervous system. Okay, it is part here. See, it is shown here, the spinal cord and the CNS, the central nervous system. And then here, explain the structure of the reflex arc with the help of a figure. This is your reflex arc. Okay, explain the structure of the reflex arc with the help of a diagram. And here you can see that CNS, the central nervous system. Alright, you can see this. Your hand is touching a hot object, a frying pan or something like that. It is extremely hot एक्सीडेंटली उसको टच हो जाते हैं, एकदम गर्म होता है, यू विथड्रॉ योर हैंड इंस्टेंटली ऑलमोस्ट. व्हाई? बिकॉज at the tips of your fingers there are those sensory receptors. These sensory receptors able to feel the pain and the heat. They convey that message through the sensory neurons, the sensory nerves. The sensory neurons are part of the sensory nerves, and they carry the message to the motor neurons, which are actually part of the motor nerves. Okay, sensory nerves, sensory neurons, motor nerves, motor neurons. Okay, and the spinal cord is involved. You can see the red part. Okay, the message going to the brain is cut off. देखो मैसेज ब्रेन की तरफ नहीं जाता है, इसमें वहां पे रेड एरो है, वो दिखाता है कि उसकी तरफ जाते हैं, जनरली उसकी तरफ जाएगा मैसेज. बट जब रिफ्लेक्स एक्शन होता है, जैसे कि इसमें दिखाया है, वो रेड पाथ, देखो रेड पाथ. ओके, यहाँ पे देखो, यहाँ पे ब्रेन इज कट ऑफ, यहाँ पे स्पाइनल कॉर्ड से वापस इसकी तरफ जाता है. ओके, you can see that red path, the path taken by the red action is taken because the brain is cut off in a reflex arc, and only the spinal cord is involved and the sensory nerves and the motor nerves. So the action is instantaneous. Generally 90% तो नहीं, 99% cases में brain की तरफ message जाता है, the brain is involved. But in a reflex arc you can see the brain is not involved. So this is a reflex arc. Okay, in a reflex arc, that red path is important. Okay, you can see the effector muscles which is affected by the impulse. Okay, वो instantly हो जाता है क्योंकि ब्रेन की तरफ जाता ही नहीं मैसेज, स्पाइनल कॉर्ड से आ जाता है. Alright, those you can see. This is an important question with the diagram. Can you now trace the sequence of events which occur when a bright light is focused on your eyes? Same thing. Okay, the brain is not involved. Immediately, involuntarily, the pupils begin to contract. Okay. Now, then after that, the human brain. Alright, I'll just start a little bit and then end the video today. Otherwise, it will become quite long. The human brain. Well, we know how complex the human brain is. We know that the human brain, just like in a computer, the CPU is called the brain of the computer. Actually, इसके अंदर एक processor होता है, which is really the brain. Okay, it allows all the process. The processor, the microprocessor on the motherboard, is where the board is able to, or rather the computer is able to process information. The human brain also processes information very fast. Okay, it is better than the best computer. Remember, we humans have created the computers, so our brain is completely different. But the human brain and the brains of other animals are similar in some ways and they are dissimilar in many ways. The human brain is probably the most complex organ ever evolved in the history of the living world. Okay, nothing can be more complex than the human brain. Even today, scientists have not understood the working of the brain fully. There are certain secrets in the brain which are still not properly understood. But because of modern medical instruments, okay, we are able to map out the brain. We have understood different parts of the brain, how the brain works, when it works best, when it slows down during the night, when it is asleep, how we dream, how we don't dream, and things like that. Lots of things, how we think, how some people think better than others. Where are the thought processes located in the human brain? Okay, where is memory located? What kind of complexities are involved in the memory of a human brain? The memory of a brain and the memory of a computer are completely different. Alright, so these things are part of the human brain. We are going to discuss the human brain from tomorrow onwards. Okay, but right now just remember the human brain is probably the most complex organ ever created by nature, and it is the heart of everything that we do. Even when we are fast asleep, the brain is still functioning. Okay, even when we are not conscious about what we are doing, the brain is doing its job. The brain is a living tissue. It also needs blood and nutrition. Okay, the brain has got thousands and millions of cells inside the brain. The brain has three different parts: the forebrain, the hindbrain, and the middle brain. Okay, middle of course means middle. The hindbrain, the back part, this is called the hindbrain. H-I-N-D, the word hind means back. Hindbrain, the forebrain, the front part. Okay, and the middle brain. There is the left half of the brain and the right half of the brain. The brain is divided. वो कोबी की तरह है, फ्लावर की तरह, कोबी फ्लावर की तरह. Okay, कॉलीफ्लावर में कैसे दो पार्ट्स होते हैं, इसी तरह से इसमें भी दो पार्ट, राइट हेमिस्फीयर एंड लेफ्ट हेमिस्फीयर. Okay, at the lower part there is the medulla oblongata. Okay, medulla. Just in short, it's called the medulla. Medulla oblongata is located here, और उसी आजू बाजू pons varoli भी होता है. There is a part of the brain called the pons varoli. Now this I am not going to discuss in detail today right now. Tomorrow I will carry on with this. Again, this is not a very long lesson. Alright, just a couple of things before I end. Some of the students are watching the videos regularly. Now you see, I am taking you through the science lessons. I know some of you like watching maths videos more than science, but we have to do the science videos as well. Okay, we have to carry on. Every lesson has to be done thoroughly. That is why I am taking you through the lesson. You must watch and listen to the videos, and after that you will get the PDF. Today I am going to send out the PDF to those students, of course, who are watching regularly and providing feedback also. In some students' cases, I have got no feedback at all. I don't even know whether they are watching the videos or they are paying attention or not. Okay, you must provide some feedback in the form of comments or something like that. All right, and the PDF will help you to learn the question answers better. So the second lesson of physics, okay, the human eye and the colorful world, that I will be sending today. All right, as soon as we finish this chapter, I will send the PDF of this one. Okay, so let's keep doing this one video on maths. Today I am going to start statistics. Okay, we have finished trigonometry. Today I am going to start statistics, that I will send in the afternoon at around 4 o'clock. Meanwhile, like the videos. Please, if you have not subscribed, subscribe to the videos. Okay, press the thumbs up like button, and at the same time make comments. Your recommendations and suggestions are most welcome. Okay, thank you. Have a nice day and stay safe.